Hi guys, and welcome to today's LACUE video series on Google Plus feedback. If we have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Meagan Markerson and I am a teaching and learning consultant with AXI Education Solutions. Prior to joining AXI, I was a middle school teacher in Ascension Parish. I taught 8th grade social studies, and then my last couple of years in the classroom before I joined AXI, I was teaching 6th grade math. I also have a degree in family and consumer science, as well as my master's in ed leadership. So just a little bit about me if we haven't seen you in your schools or at LACUE before, but I'm so glad that you've joined us for this series, and I hope you learned some new and exciting tips and tricks to take into the new school year. So a little bit about today's fun and what we'll go through. We're going to kind of venture into various different Google for Education apps and how you can utilize them to increase feedback or just different ways that you might not have been using them already to engage yourself in feedback with your students and your students in feedback with one another. Sorry, mouthful there on what I was trying to say. So before we jump in, just a cute little quick reminder of the beauty of Google. So hang tight right here real quick and then we'll keep going.
Oh, here she comes. She's a scary lady. She's an angry tiger. She's a man gobbler. Eater. She's a man eater. Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy. She'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes.
So that little reminder is just to remind you of the beauty of Google. So if you've forgotten, which you probably have not, collaboration is the huge advantage that you have in using Google for Education. And that's really one of the things that we're going to build on as we talk about feedback with Google. I also love to use this quote in this series. Technology will never replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers is transformational. And I love this quote because it really plays into the SAMR model for Google that I like to use when implementing some of these tools to really show that as you do some of these tasks that we'll talk about today, you'll really start to move into the modification and redefinition levels of that SAMR model. And we know that just throwing technology in a classroom is not going to replace the great teaching skills that still need to be accompanied with the technology. So without further ado, we will jump right into the first thing, which is Google Slides and using feedback within Google Slides. So this one I've kind of broken down into two levels for you. So as a beginner with Google Slides, if you're just starting your journey with Google for Education in your school or in your district, this is a quick little easy way to start going beyond just using slides as a substitute for PowerPoint and typing your lectures or your presentations in to show up at the front of the classroom. So as you're using those presentations, Google Slides actually has a tool called Slides Q&A built into it. When you are in presentation mode, it's actually found in this ribbon down in the bottom left-hand corner, right there where you see Q&A. You can also get to this feature up at Present if you hit the drop-down menu and go to Presenter View. Most of the time, I'm using it from the full screen mode, so I'll show you there. All you'll do is you'll simply hit Q&A, and then it'll bring you this little pop-up window here. So I'm going to minimize these out of the background. Sorry about that. And from here, you'll have an option to start a new Q&A session. If you've done a Q&A session before in the particular presentation you're in, you'll also see continue a recent, but I'm going to start us a new one so you can see what that looks like. Once I've done that, you'll notice that at the top of my presentation, I now get this little ribbon that says a little URL to get to where my students will actually engage with that Q&A option. So what your students would do is they would open up a tab in their Chromebook or whatever device that they're using, and they would type in this URL. Additionally, you could post it on Google Classroom for them because we know sometimes them typing in a URL is a little bit of a nightmare. So just for the ease of you seeing what that will look like, I'm going to copy and paste, and then I'm going to go into an incognito window and be the student. It's a little confusing on, what this page looks like the first time your kids go there, because you'll notice it actually says ask a question. And sometimes that throws off the audience because they are responding to a question that you have actually asked. So this feature was designed so that presenters could turn this on, and throughout their presentation, audience members could ask questions and engage. While you definitely can use it in that manner, I really love to use it to get quick, instant feedback from my students as far as, maybe they're brainstorming about a new objective, or maybe I just want them to rate themselves on how they feel so far within a lesson. I don't necessarily use this as a quiz or formative check feature, and I'll show you why in just a second. But it's a great way to get a pulse on your audience and keep them constantly part of the presentation instead of just you controlling everything that's going on in the conversation. So once my students get here, they can respond to either a question that I've built into the slides. So you can see here I have one typed in, give your best description of what causes an earthquake. But a lot of times in my classroom, I would come up with questions that I didn't think of prior, and I wanted them to all be responsible for responding. So I would just ask them out loud, and they would come and type and ask into the feedback from the Q&A. So if I'm a student, let's pretend I'm going to say an earthquake happens when tectonic plates move. Okay, couple things you'll notice here, asking anonymously. Right now I'm in an incognito window. If I was signed in a domain like you'll be with your students, their name will show there, but they'll also have the option to ask anonymously. I'm all about being upfront and honest about, some of the downfalls of features sometimes. And in this one currently, if a student asks anonymously, you don't have the ability on the back end to see who it is. I don't like that necessarily being a teacher, because we know that some students will use this to their advantage to do or kind of bend the rules a little bit. But the workaround for this was I always told my kids, this is your participation. So if you don't submit one and I don't see your name, you're not going to get points. And that usually narrowed it down. If there was like one or two who did ask anonymously and were trying to be goofy, I could figure out who they were. So there's a way to kind of work around with it. And just remember, we can't punish all of our students and hold them back from these experiences because one or two are always going to push the limits. So just a little bit about that anonymous feature there. So once my student has typed their response, they're going to hit the blue submit button, and then it's going to start a thread, almost like a Twitter thread or Facebook feed or something like that. They'll see all the responses starting to come in from their classmates. I love this too because they have the ability to thumb up or thumbs down, so that's great for them agreeing or disagreeing with other students' responses, especially if it is just a brainstorming portion of the class, to kind of see where are they thinking, correct answers lie from what their classmates are saying. As far as what that looks like on the teacher end, that little pop-up window that came up earlier will start to also populate those responses here. So if I had more students responding, I would see them all populating in this list. If a student says something really good and I want to show that to the rest of the class, instead of just reading it out loud to them, we know they're better when they have a visual. There's actually a button called Present where if I click that, it adds it into my slideshow here. That way they can all read it from the screen, write it down if they want, take a screenshot. If you're pushing it out through Share with Classroom, kind of however you're working that around, it's a great way to bring that into the conversation large for them to see. And when you're done, you just hit hide and it goes back to your original slide. When you're done with a Q&A session, if you don't want it to run the whole entire presentation, you want to control when students are able to ask questions or respond to questions. You can turn it off at the top. So currently I'm accepting questions. When I'm done, I'll turn it off, and you'll notice that URL on this screen is now gone away. Then you can close out of those speaker notes. A lot of times teachers will say, well, I don't want to close out of the teacher notes because I don't want their responses to go away. You can actually go back and visit the Q&A history under Tools and see the different sessions that were opened. So you can see there was one at 1:12 that had no responses in it, and then another one at 1:39 that had our student sample response in there. This is really great that it time and date stamps it. If you teach multiple blocks of a class, you'll be able to tell which one contains which student. So I really like the history feature as well. As PLC partners, you can pull those up on your planning time and compare what students were saying and use that as ways to continue your lesson or fix misconceptions if it comes up in that manner. I would say my absolute favorite way to use Q&A would be on days when I didn't get to my formal formative at the end, but I needed something for my students to stop and reflect and kind of a debrief time. I would open up the Q&A and they would either share one thing they learned that day or one thing they were still confused on. That way I could kind of build off of that as my intro into the next day's lesson. Some other things with Google Slides, collaborative presentations and using the comment feature. So just a little example of collaborative slides. Love, love, love doing this, but if you're new to Google and you're still trying to figure out Google Classroom and sharing and all that, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. So take it in stride and small steps. Start with Q&A first. But if you are ready for that, the best way to do this is make a template and post it on Google Classroom, either to the students get their own copy. Really in this manner, you're going to want them all to just have edit access to where they're in the same presentation. So this is a sample alliteration lesson that a teacher did. And originally these slides were just their presentation slides. They were going to present and teach from them. But now that that teacher had Google, they said, well, I'm going to actually post this to Google Classroom. I'm going to give everybody edit access, and they're going to actually have the ability to have my notes in front of them, and then I'm going to turn it into a collaborative workspace once we've kind of learned a little bit about alliteration. So you can see these first few slides are the teachable moments, the examples, and what is alliteration, kind of building that background knowledge for the students. This one even contains a link in here, so that's another great way to use slides aside from feedback is linking in your YouTube videos. You could actually import the video itself like you saw me do with a little Hall & Oates video. And then from there, they turned it into a workspace. So on the assigned slide, the student would demonstrate their understanding of alliteration by sharing a tongue twister. So all the teacher did was build these template slides for the student to go in and type their example and their name. Now everybody has the ability to access everyone in the class's examples and give each other feedback if the teacher sets it up that way, or the teacher can easily go in and give comments to individual students as they're working within the Google Slides presentation, and that student would see that live show up on their slide. If you choose to do collaborative slides presentations, sometimes I don't even have lesson notes in mind. It's just a template and a workspace for each student in there, and after they do their activity, they have an assignment to go to the slide below them and offer them feedback based on criteria we've built on that learning objective that the task is built around. As far as grading goes, though, if you're going to do this, a quick little example for you while we're here, or tip for you while we're here, is to use the Control F, or if you're on a Mac, Command F feature. If you do that, you'll get a little document search, just like in any Microsoft app or anything you've used before. Control F, Command F lets you search within that document. So if I'm trying to look for Ashley's in order to go and grade hers or give points or whatever it may be, instead of me clicking through 25 slides trying to find hers, I can just type her name in or the first 3 letters, and it's going to show me where her work is. So just a quick little productivity tip for you in working with Google Slides or Google Docs or Google Sheets that works in all of those applications. So Control F or Command F if you're on a Mac. Some other examples for you in using Google Slides. These are from a classroom teacher. She used Google Slides as a way for her students to do test corrections. That way she would get access to all of their work and could easily go in and use the comment feature or have the student share their presentation with another student in order to get feedback. I'm going to share this with you at the end, and there's a copy of this activity template for you to access. But basically, what she did was just made a simple template, posted it on Google Classroom. For this one, she did every student gets a copy because each student would have their own and then would share with a peer, or the teacher would go in and give feedback using the comment feature or even the speaker notes. That's a great way to utilize the speaker notes as well. So you can see her directions here. Choose 3 problems that you want to receive feedback on. Insert a blank slide for each problem, and she had them use LACUE as a whiteboard space so they could insert their work, because we know math sometimes is a little hard to do all digitally. So if you have touchscreen iPads or Chromebooks especially, LACUE is a great resource to allow your students to work, and they can take screenshots and insert it into their Google Slides. She would also have them include a text box that included their thinking and or their question that they still had. So if they still couldn't figure out why they missed a particular problem, they still were responsible for articulating that, so she knew where to give feedback. And then if they have more than 3, they were to move their top 3 missed problems up to the top, so they could actually have more slides in here if time allowed, but their objective was to get at least their top 3 that they missed. So here's the blank slide for them. All the students would have to do is copy and paste. You could even take this a step further and have the slides already in there with the text box laid out. I find as you're starting to work with your students in this kind of way, giving them more of a setup and outline at first works great until they kind of get used to the flow of how those things work, and then you can kind of give them a blank template. This particular teacher used this all the time, so by second 9 weeks, third 9 weeks, the kids knew what she expected and what needed to be on each slide. So just another little example for you there. Some other super quick ways to provide feedback in Google Slides. If you use the glow and grow or star and stairs feedback tools, using like a Bitmoji or just clip art in on slides is a really great way to just do some quick feedback in there. I know my students and I use stars and stairs all the time, so I would put a star by their work that matched or met the criteria, and then a stair by ones where they needed to continue growing. And I didn't go and do that on every single one. I would be strategic and pick and choose on which ones I would give them stars and stairs. That way they could continue building on our objectives criteria to meet that goal. So you can see this teacher used those Bitmojis here, obviously a question mark because the student didn't complete that task, and then the Team Awesome one-on-one that they did accurately and correctly. And then again, just a reminder about using the comment feature in slides. If you're new to Google Slides and you're not sure how to do a comment, there's multiple ways to do things in Google if you haven't learned that yet. But in Slides, what I do is I highlight and then I hit the comment button up here at the top, and your comment box will open up to the side. Okay, moving into feedback with Google Docs. So this one's kind of similar to Slides in the comment feature, but mainly I wanted to bring this one up for some tips and reminders. So if you have a Google Doc open, no, that's not the one I wanted, sorry y'all. Let's get a blank one. And you want to provide feedback to a student. So maybe you posted an assignment on Google Classroom and you're going in and you're grading those. The comment feature is very similar in Docs as it is to slides. It's actually a little bit easier because when you highlight in Docs, you automatically get this comment button that shows up on the side. So you don't actually have to come up here and click it. So commenting is a super great way to give instant feedback while your students are working in the classroom. So there's no need for them to type a whole paper and wait for you to get home that evening and grade the whole thing. As they're working, just like you used to walk around while they were writing, now you'll be on your computer with their work pulled up and giving them those comments via the comment feature versus walking around and verbally giving them that feedback for them to use. I know several of the students I've talked to, especially in my school, we were a one-to-one district with Chromebooks, so we used this a lot. The students were more likely to take that feedback than the next day when they have already done the whole assignment, because in their mind, they're task-oriented. When they're done, they are done. They don't want to go back. So them getting the comment right then and there and they can fix it before they've even gone on, super game changer for the students that I've worked with. So great way to utilize that. Of course, we know that an even better way to kind of make our lives easier is to let students give each other feedback. And that does take a little bit of work in building what does good feedback look like and, kind of giving them some criteria to go off of. But if you've got that foundation, let them share their Google Docs or Google Slides with each other and give those comments and feedback to each other. I will say, if you are letting them share, remind them when they're sharing to share on comment only. So under the share settings, when you're in a file versus a folder, you get these three options. So instead of just edit and view, you can actually set them to comment only. That means all they will be able to do is give comments. They can't delete text, they can't add text. I taught middle school, and these kids will tear things up if you let them have edit access just because they want to be silly and goofy, so they'll delete each other's work or add in silly pictures because they're just being kids. So if you put it on comment only and teach your students to share that way with each other, kind of eliminates some of that headache of them bending the rules a little bit. So just a reminder there, as well as the comment history or version history. So you do have a comment history up here in the top, so don't forget about that, especially as students resolve your comments. If you want to go back and see what you said and make sure that they're actually doing them before they resolve them, you can come up to that comment thread and do that there. As far as the version history of a document, so if your students do share on, can edit, and another student goes in and accidentally overrides their work or does something they're not supposed to, you can go into the version history of a document and see who did what. So you can notice this first one at 154 is the original. I just opened it, nothing's there. And then at 155, I typed, hello, my name is Megan, and it's highlighted green, and then I have a green dot associated with me. If there was another student in this document or another person I was collaborating with, they would be assigned a separate color. That way you can see who's doing what, as well as restore to a previous version. So if at 154, this is the version I wanted it blank again, I could click that version and then come up here and hit restore. Little tip for you too, if this has happened to you on files you've shared with other teachers, your work is not gone, you do not have to restart over or try to hit the undo button 700 times. Go and just restore your version. Okay, so that's a little bit with feedback on slides and docs. The next one we'll take a look at is Google Classroom. So oftentimes we see teachers using Classroom every day, and it's great, and they're posting assignments and they're posting announcements, but we don't see them utilizing a whole lot of the question feature. The question feature is really great on Google Classroom. So if you haven't utilized it today, it is a super easy way to get instant feedback from your students on multiple choice questions or even short answer questions. And I'm going to go into Google Classroom, but just as a reminder before we get in there in case I forget to say it, students can be muted if you're using the comment feature in Google Classroom along with the questions and you have students who aren't using it appropriately. Remember, under that People tab, you can go in and actually mute students. So let's take a look at that. So you can see here, I have my Google Classroom classwork stream pulled up for you, and I already have a question ready for us to respond to, or I'll just show you a sample because we've got a student response in it already. So you can notice that I posted the question here. You actually have the ability to even attach videos or Google Docs or files if those students need to watch or do something prior to answering your questions. On the teacher end, when you click in, you'll see the responses from those students. So Marcus responded here. I can reply and give him feedback right there. If I have my settings for my classroom on, here's where I need it, sorry. Students can post and comment, or as long as it's on, students can comment, one of these top two. My students will have the ability to go in and actually comment on each other's work as well. So since I'm on the teacher view, I'm seeing where I can reply here. I could actually click on Marcus himself, and down at the bottom I have the ability to add a private comment. So if I reply up at the top here, this is going to be for everybody in the class to see. Private comments just going to go directly to Marcus. So you know your students, you know ones who don't like to get feedback in front of everybody, so to say, but sometimes that reply all for everyone to see might not be necessarily directed to that student, but just something general for everybody to benefit from. So that was a short answer example. A multiple choice example would look something like this. So the student will see this question, the opposite of a number is always its absolute value, true or false, on their screen. They'll click either one, and then on the teacher side, you'll get a total for who said what, and once you have responses here, you can actually click on them to see which student said true, which student said false. And this can be done, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, however many you want. It's very similar to making a multiple choice question in Google Forms, but just one at a time on your classwork stream. I have posted in the presentation for you a link on some ideas for using the question feature, just because I don't have time to elaborate on all of them right now, but there's some really, really good ideas in here that align with the feedback conversation we're having, and just some good teaching tips for using the question feature. If you've never posted a question in Google Classroom before, you just use your Create button and then choose Question. In both options, multiple choice and short answer, the screen's going to look pretty much the same here, except you'll just change from short answer to multiple choice, and then you'll have the ability to type your options down here. As far as engaging students with each other, when you're in multiple choice, you have the ability for students to see the class summary. If you don't want them to see it, they're only going to see that after they've answered, so no worries. They can't see everybody's responses until they've actually completed it. If you don't want that on, you can just show it from your end if you have a projector or a Promethean board or panel at the front of the classroom where you can project that image for them to see. When you're in short answer, students have the ability to reply to each other, and students can edit their answer. So those are ones you can toggle on here. I love the students can reply to each other feature because it almost creates that, or it really does create that discussion board for them where they can go in and respond to each other. And the question, again, doesn't have to necessarily be them responding to a question. It could be them posting a sample of their work. I've had a teacher who used this for ELA all the time to post certain sections of a narrative or a paper they were working on. So the first day they might have been working on the intro. At the end of class, the exit ticket was to post your intro paragraph to the classroom stream. So they just copy and pasted from the Google Doc they were already working in onto the stream, and then another student had to go and provide them feedback. So just some examples of ways you can use that beyond just asking questions back and forth from the students. Okay, continuing on, a few more left here. I know I'm moving a little quick, so feel free to pause as you need. Trying to keep it short and sweet as much as possible because I know it's still summertime and I don't want to take up all of your freedom right now. So next feature is Google Keep. So Google Keep, if you've never used it before, is basically like virtual sticky notes. I love, 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 love Google Keep. I used to have a computer screen full of sticky notes and they would fall off everywhere. I mean, I would lose them walking from my classroom to my car. I'd find them in the parking lot the next day, all wet and rained on. And it never failed. The night I needed that sticky note, that was the one that I lost. So when I found out about Google Keep, I was definitely a believer and switched over, and now I keep everything in Google Keep. But as far as using it in the classroom for feedback, tons of ways you can do this, but I love keeping like a list of feedback that I know are common responses that I'll probably need to share with students. That way I can just copy and paste from there instead of having to retype over and over. You can see I have these Bitmojis here. I'll kind of show you how I implement those as well as this feedback list. You can use Keep for reflection. So you can make a reflection note and share it with your students and they can respond. And then even learning goals. So if you have a handful of students that you're tracking that each 9 weeks or however your school sets that up for growth, you can keep a note for each student. You can share that with them because you have the ability to collaborate, as well as maybe an administrator or an instructional coach on your campus that's also helping you work with those students. Or if it's a behavior goal that you're working with a student and you have a SBLC facilitator that's also monitoring that student, you can collaborate on those. I have my students, or would have my students, utilize Google Keep for creating their criteria list. So when we started a new objective and we were breaking that down, okay, we have this large objective, but what are the 3, 4, 5 things that you have to do to get there? And that way they always had that criteria list with them everywhere they went. We used to have them and tape them down on the desk, but by day 3, that tape and that paper's all ripped up. So this was a great way for them to always have it, even when they went home, because my students' Chromebooks traveled with them. So Keep is really awesome for tons and tons of reasons. There's way more features in here other than just adding a collaborator and changing the color, as you can see. And I have some tip sheets linked in the presentation for you if you're interested in diving deeper in that. But as far as taking a look at how that can integrate in other applications. So if I've taken those Keep notes and I'm in Docs or I'm in Slides, if you've ever noticed this little side panel, or you might have noticed this ribbon here and then you went and hit it because it was in your way and you didn't know what those buttons were for, that's actually a shortcut to your Google Calendar, your Google Keep, and your Google Task. Task is like task list, so I find it's kind of redundant, so I just use Keep, but great feature to check out too if you're interested in that. So Google Keep will actually open from the side here and I can see my list. So if I wanted to use this feedback for students, I could actually come and copy and paste or drag and drop it into a comment on that page. Additionally, if my students have typed those criteria list, they can open their task and it's right next to the presentation or the Google Doc that they're working on, so they have it side by side. So they don't have to keep clicking back and forth to reference things. So I really, really enjoy Keep in that manner, that I can kind of use it intertwined into other Google applications. Okay, moving forward, here's those little tips for you if you're interested in learning more once you get this shared with you. And I'm kind of backtrack 1 second too before I forget, because I know we only have 2 left, but I'll forget after those 2 to go back and show you this. As far as Google Classroom and Google Docs is concerned, if you have given your students let me get to that page, sorry, an assignment where they are working on a Google Doc. So if you're not familiar with Classroom, when you post them an assignment and you send it individually to them, everybody will get their own copy, and as the teacher you can hover in and go in and actually look at their work even if they haven't turned it in. So you can look at them working live, you can go in after they've turned it in and give feedback. So either way that works, but there's a new feature, probably came out almost a year ago at this point, but some teachers are still not aware that it's there. So when you're in the grading screen, so to say, you can see on the side you can go in and add a grade, add private comments. I still have all the abilities of Google Docs within the screen up here with my ribbon, but there's a comment bank feature as well. So this is kind of like the way that I was using Google Keep. Now I use the comment bank if I'm using Docs instead of Keep. But if I know that there is a paragraph or a couple sentences of feedback that on the first 2 students I found myself typing it twice already, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that and add it to the comment bank. That way the next student that comes up, all I have to do is copy from the clipboard, go in, and add the comment here. Super quick and easy. So that would have made my life so much easier if that would have been there whenever I was in the classroom using Google Classroom and Google Docs. But I love that, especially because I know I spent hours writing and typing the same feedback over and over, and sometimes I would even just go, you know what, I'm not even going to type it on their paper. We're just going to all talk about it tomorrow. But I find that when I did that, if it wasn't on their paper for them to see, oh, she's talking to me, they didn't pay attention to me. So I love this feature very much. So option there to keep in mind. If you tried Google Classroom when your district was new to Google and it was overwhelming and you've not gone back to it, they really have done a lot in the last year and a half to umph Google Classroom up. One of those things being this grading screen that we're in right now. You used to have to click individually each student's work, and you would have 8 million tabs open across the top if you were like me and taught 4 blocks and had 117 students. But now you can actually just click to the next student or drop down and pick their name from the list. So it makes toggling between kids so much easier. So just some little teacher tips there while we were on the topic of giving feedback. Okay, winding down, Google Forms. This one's going to be super quick because it's just an added feature that they added in. Students would answer on Google Forms. It was great. It would self-grade for you if it was multiple choice. But a lot of times I wanted a short answer or a constructed response because we know our standardized tests typically have that on there. So they've added a feedback feature where you can go in, whether it's multiple choice or short answer, and respond digitally versus orally or having to write them additional feedback notes. So when you're in your Google form, once your students have answered under the response tab, you can either go into questions or individual and you'll get the feedback feature. So if I'm in here individually, you can see that on the question, so these are right, so I probably won't be going to give feedback there. Let's find one that's incorrect. Okay, so if I wanted to provide feedback on this question, I would go and click Add Individual Feedback, and this little window will pop up. Super self-explanatory, and where you enter your feedback, and then you can attach links in YouTube videos as well. Love this feature because I can immediately direct my students to go and look at a strong model or watch a video sample of that content topic and help them without actually having to be there necessarily for them. So, kind of a way to clone yourself in providing that feedback and them seeing it digitally rather than waiting on you to visit and speak with each of them. You can also do that per question so that everybody sees that on the question as well. So under responses, question, and then you can see where you can add feedback on those particular responses. So if you see that it's one that a lot of students missed, instead of going and typing it individually, maybe you just put it on the question itself. So that is feedback with Google Forms. And then lastly is Google Sheets. So I know a lot of times we think of Google Sheets as where you collect data, or you only use a Google Sheets when you've done a Google form, but it really can be used for so much more than that. So just some simple examples to show you to get started with: reflection logs, journals, students keeping track of their test scores, informative checks. These two here that you'll see. Let me make this large screen again. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy toggling in and out of all my screens. When you work with 800 Google accounts, it gets a little crazy. This one is an example of a journal log. So I know even when my school went one-to-one, it was in the first few years of that kind of transfer to the Chromebooks, and sometimes we were still using paper, and I was like, I just don't know, how I could do this digitally, because if I do it with Google Docs, they have to have a new doc every day, or they couldn't find their doc, and there was some growing pains there. But once I got an understanding of Classroom and how all the apps integrated there, and really ways that I could use apps in more ways than I thought before, it really started to click. And this is one that really made sense to me. Even though I didn't teach ELA, we did write and journal a lot even in math, and I would have loved to have implemented this instead of my manila folder, or the folder with the prongs, because I'm literally having PTSD right now thinking about my students opening those prongs and putting in hole punched paper in the right order, because I'm OCD. So would have saved me a little emotional distress doing things this way. So this one, you can see in the first column they put in the topic, so that would probably something I would type or write on the board for them to copy, and then they would respond. Simple as that. At the end of the day, on my planning period, while they're working in independent practice, I can go in and provide them feedback as well as their participation points. And then if you want to get even more technical with it, you could add in a formula or conditional formatting to actually total and add that up for you. So at the end of the week, 9 weeks, however you're pulling that grade, it already shows you that grade summary for you. Additionally, reflection log. So this is the one that I think about when I think about my folders with the hole punch paper and them trying to put it in there. Every new unit, we would have a learning target tracker, and it would have all their learning targets in it. And each day that we did a new objective or target, they would give themselves a before rating and after rating, and they would kind of use that as a reflection log throughout the whole unit and year. And then they had a whole packet of them at the end. Sounds beautiful in theory, but we know kids. Half of them forgot the folder at home. One of them pulled the page out of the folder one day because they didn't want to undo the prongs. Or you just have the students who bought the cheap folder and it fell apart. Or, just all the various factors that go into the daily life in the classroom. I so wish I would have done it in this manner, because now it would be digital. I would have access to it because I would have posted it through Google Classroom for them. So anytime I wanted to go in and look at their work, look at their reflections, give them feedback, I would have had it there. Because some days I wanted to see, what were their questions they still had that day. But then I wanted them to also take that folder home because it had other important information for them to do homework in. So now I wouldn't have had to hold their folders and bring home 800 folders at night to go through and write feedback. Additionally, I love to copy and paste their responses here to use as a intro to the next day. So if they had a lot of students asking the same question, now I can start my lesson addressing that and then kind of highlighting the things that they said would be a tip they would give to a student new about this topic. If you've done any, research into Hattie and the 7 strategies for learning and feedback, I'm drawing a blank on the book that I'm wanting to reference here. Sorry. These learning target trackers are one of the huge things they use because we know students being a part and a role in that feedback and in their learning is going to greatly impact their learning outcomes. So super, super huge believer in these reflection logs and love doing it digitally so that you have access everywhere, they have access everywhere. Okay, so if you haven't noticed, I love to talk and I could go on and on about even more. But like I said, I'm going to be respectful of your time. And that's kind of where we're going to wrap for today. If you want a copy of this presentation, you can type in this tiny URL here and it will bring you to this presentation with all the links and everything in it, especially those ones if you want to dig deeper into. Feel free to type that URL in and then click on those links yourself. Additionally, a lot of the things that I was hitting on, we have a whole Google Level 1 certification series on our axipd.com. So if you're interested in that, even this course goes a little bit deeper and a little bit more in depth on some topics and examples. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out axipd.com. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us, and I hope that you learned some new tips and tricks. If you need anything, feel free to shout. Here's my email again, and I'll be happy to assist you.